And the next talk is about GIG, the Global Innovation Gathering. Vicky Wenzelmann is talking about it. She's a person with the huge blue bus standing between this venue and the other venue, where you can go and have fun playing around with hardware and building small robots with who can paint pictures, and yeah. And she will talk about the Global Innovation Gathering. It's a community started at Republica in 2013, where lots of makers and hackers from all over the world, especially Africa, South America, and other parts, Asia, come together to debate about how to play around with technology and hardware.
Thank you very much for coming here, and thank you for the fantastic introduction, Markus. I'll elaborate on what Markus said. So, we are GIG. This is us this year at Republica in Berlin. As you can see, a relatively large group of people in front of the big blue bus, which is the GIG Labmobile. And I thought I'd take you through who we are, what we do, why we think this network is important, and what our members and what GIG as a network is doing. And if you have any questions, I'm planning to leave a lot of space for those in the end, but please raise your hand immediately if there's anything that's not clear. Yeah, so this is us. You can see we're quite global. I think we have all 5 continents on here. And you can see here where we are. Like, these are the countries where we have very active members that contribute to the network and take part in the events. We started in 2013 as a little booth at Republica, which in that year consisted of cardboard boxes. And it was called the Global Innovation Lounge, which was an idea of Geraldine, who at that time was a Republica curator. And she has a background in net politics, digital society, technology meets social issues. And very early on, she brought this background together with her other background, which is in development work. She lived in the Philippines for a long time, worked in many different countries. And as much as we all know that the internet has no borders, the social and technological, especially innovation programs, are still much dominated by the United States, Europe, and Australia, Japan, more and more in other countries. But back then, there was a lack of conversation between other countries and the majority world and just the whole globe. So when we started, we were from, I think, 13 countries. And back then, because my focus is very often on sub-Saharan African countries, so I know very well the statistics from Africa as a whole. Back then, there were 28 co-working places, maker spaces, innovation hubs, whatever you want to call it. Nowadays, it's 620. So there's a growing scene, a growing need, obviously, that is satisfied by setting up more and more spaces. And you've all come to Republica, so you understand why networking is important, and we try to do that digitally and physically, because as we've heard in a few of the talks over the last 2 days, digital doesn't replace physical. So what we do is we represent and foster a global innovation ecosystem by enabling conversations and exchange between all parties involved. That means that there's maker spaces, the managers of those, there's community spaces, innovation spaces, techies, hackers, makers themselves. There's also politicians that come to GIG events and are members of GIG. There are cultural activists, there's social activists, there's a lot of different people that don't necessarily would be in the same ecosystem if it wasn't for a network that fosters that. And we believe that by just opening a space and create the necessary background for conversations, a lot of new stuff will come into this world, and it will be more diverse, more sustainable, and more just. And now I want to introduce you to some of our members, because this is, whenever I say this as an introduction, people go like, so what does that mean? So let me introduce you to some of the giggers. This is Geraldine, who I've mentioned before, and as she's not here, I thought I'd include her in that list, because it's for Gig. Gig wouldn't exist without her, and she founded it, she started it, and we all love her dearly for it. And so I just wanted to make sure that she's in these slides and in this talk. Here we have Narus. Narus is from Iraq, from Basra. I learned a lot from him about the differences between southern Iraq, northern Iraq, Baghdad, long before that was prominent in the media because of Daesh. And Narus is a pharmacist by training, but he's an artist at heart and a designer. And he bought very cheaply 2 containers from the US Marines when they moved out of Basra and started a science camp in there. So a place where young people can learn about science and technology and work on things and build things, make things, and program things. And he believes that science thrives when it is shared. So Iraq is not necessarily the best known place for open source and open culture, but Narus is definitely trying to change that, and he's succeeding. Science Camp now built a factory around these 2 containers and grew in numbers, grew in influence, and they are working a lot with CNC machines. And what you can see in that little picture up there is a prosthetic hand that they made there, 3D printed there. And Narus also famously invented or made a suit that you can put on, and then it records your movements, so you can make your own 3D animations with you as the star in Iraq, in a place where it's very often above 50 degrees in summer. Another super impressive member of Gig is Michael Gatto from Kenya. Michael is a maker in every sense of the word. And at the moment, he's working for Médecins Sans Frontières. So he's going into refugee camps. He's based in Nairobi, and he's going into refugee camps in the region. And he's not only fixing things that are broken there, he's also coming up with maker interventions, new inventions, new technologies that can make life easier. One thing that he did in the last few months was a makerspace from the back of an electric bike. So he had this pedal bike that was electrically supported, and in the back there was this massive box. And he had a makerspace in there with which he drove around in Yida, refugee camp in South Sudan, and he did workshops with children from the back of that bike, and they just learned how to make what they need, which for the kids, I don't really know, but one famous example from this humanitarian making field is that you have a large water hose and a small water pipe, but you don't have the connection for the 2. That is a piece that can be easily 3D printed, but is very hard to procure. And so Michael does things like that. Before he started with MSF, he was also part of an initiative called MakerNet, which Susan from Field Ready, who is here, talked about earlier this morning. The idea of MakerNet is that production should be localized. So Field Ready also comes from a humanitarian maker background. And what they realized was that it's very hard for the United Nations to procure 100,000, say, tweezers, which might be needed after an earthquake. So where do they get the 100,000 tweezers from? And it's a long procurement process. And to enable that process whilst also enabling local production facilities, they thought, wouldn't it be cool if you need 100,000 tweezers, why not order 100 from 1,000 makers? So that 1,000 people in the country with far shorter distribution ways and transport and logistics costs could earn a living from that, and still there would be 100,000 tweezers delivered to the people that need them. They're working on that and using blockchain technology for it. Most of it is done in Nepal, and Michael worked on one of the pilot projects where they tested out how it could go in Kenya, and it's looking very good. They are in between financing the pilot and financing the projects. So watch out for MakerNet and Field Ready, and always watch out for Michael. He's a very, very cool guy. Staying within the humanitarian maker part, there's also Sam Block with his organization Communautaire. Communautaire was founded in Haiti after the earthquake there because a lot of the people working in humanitarian aid get very frustrated by this situation that there's stuff that's needed on the ground, but they can't get it there because they would have to order 100,000 of these things. And so Communautaire started as a hack for humanitarian aid. So they brought 3D printers to Haiti and printed, for example, these connections between different sized water pipes. And Communautaire Haiti was going well, and it was a proper makerspace after a while, and then they gave it over to the Haitian community, and Communautaire kind of didn't really know what, like, they didn't have a proper plan. And then the earthquake in Nepal happened, and the big agencies that they were working with in Haiti called them in to come to Nepal to work there. And Communautaire Nepal is now a thriving community of its own there, where a lot of innovation around technology and software, hardware happens. Also, a lot of education always happens in gig spaces. And right now, Communautaire is also working in Greece, and they are using that big blue bus outside for that, which they were given for that project by Gig, and they're doing maker workshops with refugees and the local Greek population, which is pretty cool, and Ozo outside can tell you more about that. Now, we've been quite deep in this humanitarian field, which is one part of what Gig does, but not the most important one. More important is what's happening for just normal people. What are the issues around the world that drive people to innovate, to change the world? And one prime example for that, which links nicely to the wearable technologies workshop that we had in the afternoon, is our friend Nidhi from India. Her project is called Digitally Speaking, and it is always more of an art project, raising awareness, than an actual product that she wants to be produced at a scale, because it would be scary. Nidhi is the woman in the back doing this, and the woman in the front doing that is wearing her suit, which is kind of like a superwoman suit. It has pepper spray in the shoulder blades. It has a camera in the neck, which has a monitor here. So if you feel like somebody's following you at night, you can record them and see what they're doing. There's buttons on there, SOS buttons that call the police or your saved emergency contacts. And she made this to raise awareness for the situation in India for women, and to actually make us all have that thought that we just had. Like, what's wrong in a situation where women actually think about how to defend themselves in the way that they carry around pepper spray in their shoulder blades? And that's, for me, always an amazing example of how technological innovation can never solve social problems on its own and by itself. We always need to look at both aspects. Like there's a social aspect, and a technology will probably not solve it, like this example just showed. Another beautiful gigger, and I'm staying in the region now a little bit again, is Sama from Palestine. You can see in that video his friend who lost his hand using a prosthesis that they made at the makerspace that Sama had called Vecbox. It was a proof of concept. So these things never went into production, but it's just one of a few examples from that region where makers made prostheses, prosthetic limbs for people in makerspaces using 3D printing. There's a few other examples, and it goes to show that as much as it's sad and terrible that prostheses are needed at that scale in that region, people have hacked a way to get them cheaper than the $15,000 that they normally cost. And it's very impressive because that's like not a high-tech lab with a lot of funding. This is a makerspace that made that. Something that connects to a lot of the issues that also other people here for the region of Europe talked about is the Defy Hate Now campaign that my friend Charles from South Sudan is very active in. It's about social media hate speech and what we can do to counter it. And the conflict in South Sudan has been fueled a lot by social media in a country where there's 90% of the population not connected to social media. Still, the influential people are on social media, and the people in exile are using social media to heat up the debate and heat up the conflict. And things like check your sources. I mean, I know that even in Germany, it's hard to check your sources when it's clickbait and the message is brought across in a way that you want to believe it because it goes with what you think anyways. And in a country that has been suffering through a lot of conflict at the cost of a lot of education, that is an even bigger topic. And Defy Hate Now is doing an amazing job countering hate speech, where Germany is actually now asking South Sudan and this project for some input on what are best practices to do that. So these were some of the members. We have about 150. I picked some from the region or that are working on topics that I thought would be interesting for this audience. And we also do projects together as GIG. So Pisa Camp is a project that started in 2015 in South Sudan. And you have Martin from Colombia and Ahmed from Egypt, who went to South Sudan for Pisa Camp and gave some workshops. A Pisa Camp is something like a Republica, but smaller. It lasts a few days, and there's workshops, there's talks, there's a lot of hands-on, like not only maker workshops, but also workshops like the one that Jillian gave in the afternoon about how to secure your privacy, like what are considerations when using the internet, things like that. In South Sudan, there was a long workshop for women on financial literacy. Digital literacy is always a topic. And the idea behind the PeaceHackCamps is that you bring people together, they learn something together, they make something together, they create something together, and that overcomes all the differences. So whether you belong to this party of the conflict or that, you get together, you work on things together, and you help each other out. And then you realize that, wow, we're not like, that guy is from the other group, but he's actually a cool guy. So it doesn't mean that the conflict will stop, but it's a very good way to not talk about conflict, but just make something to get over it. And this quote from one of the participants of the South Sudan Pisa Camp in 2015, I find it very interesting because I don't know what he was referring to, or she. Like, we learned that what we thought was impossible is actually possible. So was he talking about building your own solar charger? Was he talking about financial management of your private finances, or was he talking about working together across ethnic lines? I don't know, but it's an intriguing quote. What happened next is that Martin took the idea of Pisa Camp to Colombia, where it happened in 2016. And after that, Ahmed took the idea of Pisa Camp to Egypt, where it happened this year. And all of this happened through the collaboration of the gig network. And it's beautiful to see, and I'm curious where it will be in 2018. If you have ideas, let me know. One thing that's going to happen this year and next year is the next project starts with a video, so as soon as I click, it should start.
I think that it's time that young people make their mark. We're trying to create systems that will last over time, and only policy and legislation is going to be able to do that for us. So let us, have intellectual conversations on how we can guide policymakers to see, understand, but above all support our role as innovators in society.
We're not in isolation. We are doing this with other entrepreneurs across Africa, other hubs in Africa, which echo the voice better, which make a strong message to policymakers across the continent.
So I4Policy is a gig project that is happening in collaboration with the Smart Africa Secretariat of the African Union. That's 25 African countries that actively want to work on making better policies in their countries, better legislation. One example for legislation that is a bit tricky for entrepreneurs is when the import taxes are very high, which they often are in these countries, then you literally can't buy a new computer legally because it costs 4 times as much. And also, if there's no intellectual property, how can you be safe to pitch your idea without thinking that somebody is going to steal it? Without infrastructure, like infrastructure is always on the agenda in countries that don't have good infrastructure, but it's worse for entrepreneurs and for people that want to start their own thing. At the same time, you need entrepreneurship in a lot of the countries that are part of this Smart Africa initiative, because there is not enough jobs for the young populations there created otherwise. So go to i4policy.org, read through all the recommendations that the giggers came up with, and sign it. Finally, this is one of the gig projects. Our idea of a mobile lab is that these labs are awesome. Like, you probably go to co-working spaces on quite a regular basis, or at least when you want to work somewhere abroad. But they are all in capitals and big cities. And that is a big disadvantage for people in the countryside. So take the hub to the people if you can't take the people to the hub. And we're trying that and testing that out and figuring it out as we go. And now I'd like to open for questions, because 22 minutes have already passed. Are there any questions, any remarks? None? Okay. Seems I did explain it then. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Your bus is still in front of the venue. Yep. How long?
Till tonight. We have to drive it back to the warehouse where it sleeps at 10, I think.
Okay, so come over, take a look, play around with the nice technology you have and you provide. And yeah, now I think this stage is at the end. I think there's an ending session in the stage 1, and after that we are celebrating outside of the venue, and later at 10, I think at the Epsilon venue. Thank you.